Welcome back to my channel. I appreciate y'all stopping by and checking out the video. Last week I put out a long, lengthy video on how I do leather projects. And today I'm going to start on a leather mask for an axe. Be a shorter, more condensed version. And if you have questions on the process that I'm doing, leave them in the comments or check out the video that I did last week. Without any further ado, let's get started. I've got some scrap leather. This is Wickett & Craig. I think it is an 8 to 10 ounce thickness leather. If I remember correctly, it may be a 9 to 11. I can't remember offhand, but it's a thicker leather. And this is what I'm going to make the axe mask out of. But first, I need to make a pattern. I like using these manila envelopes because they fold over and give you a good shape. So I'm just going to start tracing it out and come up with a pattern. You know, roughly lay it out where I think that I want it, and I can always customize it and make it look differently once I get it cut out. Just going to trace the bit out here. I want to leave about 1/2 inch for my welt. Going to go ahead and carry this on up because I'm going to change the shape of that here in a second anyways, and I'll get this cut out. I want my button to be somewhere in this vicinity, and so the end of my sheath is going to be, or the flap is going to be in this area. I like to do, and this is just personal, I like to try to use the axe to help shape and give me form to my project. For me, it kind of feels a little bit more organic. Ooh, I cut myself. So I'm going to label this the back of the body. Of course, this is the front flap. What I'm going to do is just trace out the same pattern so I can get my front portion of the sheath. And it doesn't have to be perfect because especially out here on the welt, you're going to be leaving a little bit. I'm going to cut it oversized to leave some trim allowance. And honestly, I probably didn't need to cut this portion out. I could have just used this to trace out the other piece of leather. But I want to have a full pattern so we can visualize what's going on. All right, we got the back and we have the front. And some of this leather is a lot thicker than the manila envelope. So some of this may be trimmed. It's already looking like I'm glad that I left extra material here because I may want to come down further with this flap. We'll see whenever we get to the actual project. Let's see, I want to come up about here and then come over under the flap. So got all my pieces cut out. I'm gonna see how they somewhat fit together. We'll start assembling this thing. I'm going to go ahead and rough this flesh side up, the smooth side, so that glue will adhere to it. My welt is going to fit in about like so. I'm just marking the inside of where the welt goes so I know where to apply glue. may have to trim that up a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm going to trim that up so it doesn't have to like go in a certain specific way. Which is not a big deal. I'll just trim that up real quick. All right, buddy, I'll take you outside. Take a break. Maybe he can wait long enough for me to get this glue applied so I can let the glue tack up while he's going to the restroom. It's a good boy. You want to go back inside? All right, let's go. Come on, let's go. All right, these edges aren't completely smooth, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and burnish. I'm going to go ahead and get my edge beveler. I think I'm going to use a larger edge beveler this time. Bevel these edges, the ones that I'm not going to be able to get to once it's pieced together. So if you look at the template, it'd be very hard when this is all put together to get this edge and this edge. I'm going to go ahead and bevel and burnish those edges. Might as well do all of them except for the one that has the welt. I'm going to wait to do that after I get it glued up and together. This is not necessary. It just helps make it a smoother, nicer looking finished product by taking the hard lines off of it. Like I said, this is going to be my welt piece. So once all that's pieced together, I will do it. And if you do this, which I said is not necessary, you also really don't have to do the inside of it. I just do it to make it look a little nicer. And I may end up trimming this top part off just depending on how everything fits together. So I may have to redo that. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to sand these edges and burnish them. It's probably going to take me a little bit longer than normal because all I have on hand is some 400 grit. But it'll get the job done. Okay, time to glue it up. Again, I use contact cement, whatever brand you choose, it doesn't really matter. I just started using this Angelus clear shoe cement and it works really well. But any contact cement that you get from hardware store or craft store will work just fine. Just going to apply to the inside of the markings that I made earlier. And the way that contact cement works is it sticks to itself. So I will apply this to both pieces, the inside of the mask and the welt. And you don't let it completely dry. I say you give it dry time, but you want it to be barely tacky, not wet, but barely tacky, but not completely dry either. The glue helps hold it together, but it's mainly to help hold it together while you add your rivets or your stitching. It's strong. You saw my other video. If you try to pull it apart, it'll pull the leather apart. But over time, I think it loses effectiveness, and that's why you have rivets or stitching, is to keep it permanently, the pieces permanently attached. Okay, I'm going to let that dry and tack up, and then we'll stick it together. That has been about 8 minutes. It might be a little too dry. It's just ever so slightly tacky, and that's what you want. Now, the reason I like using the clear shoe cement or the contact cement is because once you stick it on there, that's it. It's on there. A lot of the other glues, They're a little more forgiving. You can position it where you want it, but then you got to clamp them together and wait hours for it to dry. And I don't have that kind of time. But with the contact cement, you've got to make sure you've got it where you want it when you stick it on. So I'm going to start down here in this corner. Apply that. I mean, it's ever so slightly, so that's not even moving now. I just barely touched it on there, and it's ever so slightly, it's not moving. Now, get your hammer and set that. It helps promote the adhesion. If you had messed up and needed to pull it off before you set it, it probably wouldn't pull the leather apart. I can't guarantee that, but after you set it, it's definitely pulling leather apart. So let's see what we're looking like. Boom. And then this is going to fold over. Now that's really tight. I got a trick for that I'll show you here in just a second. But I want to kind of get where that crease is going to be so I know what to do next. I like to take my stitching groover and take a couple of passes out of that to make it easier for it to fold over. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to take my ruler. And I'm not going to go all the way to the edge with it because I don't want it to really show on the outside. But I'm just going to take a groove out of it. Take a couple passes with that, and I'll probably do 3 of these. It's just going to help that leather fold over a little bit nicer. See, it put a groove in there. If I do 3 of them, it's going to fold over a little bit easier. Like I showed in my other video, I've got a squeeze bottle with token oil mixed with a little bit of water, and that's what I like to use to burnish my edges with, just because it gives it a really good finish as long as you've prepped them well, and it helps protect it. I think it helps protect it just as well as beeswax, and definitely helps protect it more than, say, water. Be careful, don't get it on the flesh side or the smooth side, the finished side of your leather, because it will stain it. Which is kind of a trick because you gotta squeeze it to get it flowing. I got just a little bit on that very edge. I'm gonna wipe that off. Let it set up just a little bit. And you can use, like I said in the other video, canvas, blue jean. You can use the back of a tool. You can use a wood slicker. They all work well. And it is friction, not pressure. Let that dry a little bit longer. So I really wanted y'all to see this. This is just one application of the token oil and burnishing. See how glossy and nice that is compared to an unfinished, unburnished side. And you can sand that again, reapply the token oil, and get it as nice and glossy and pretty as you want. I'm about to line out my stitching groove to give me a guide to go off of for my stitches. That's what it is, a stitching groove. I just need to choose how far in I want it to go. My welt is probably just shy of 1/2 inch now because I sanded. So I'm going to lay this up here and see where it hits. That looks about right. It's almost in the middle of everything. So a stitching groover is the same thing that I used up here to take out material. It is simply a guide to tell you where to put your stitches. I'm going to go a little further out. You don't have to have a stitching groover. Just kind of makes the finished result a little nicer. You can use dividers, use whatever you want, but I would definitely suggest marking the area that you want to stitch. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge, but I'm letting the guide follow the edge of the welt, the outside of the sheath, so that I know that I have a constant spacing. You can use a stitching wheel, you can use a fork, you can use whatever you've got that'll give you consistent placement. Like I said, the stitching wheel will mark every so often of where you will need to drill your holes, and because this is so thick, you're gonna have to drill holes. But I really like the tooth pattern that my chisels give me. And I'm not going to punch all the way through this. I'm just going to use this to start my punches, so that when I drill it, it will leave the design of the chiseled tip. So I'm not going to go all the way through with it. So that punch is going to be too far. So what I'm going to do is just barely too far. I'm going to start here and work my way up. Again, make sure that your punch or your drill press is perfectly up and down, because if it's not, the holes on the back side are going to be funny. They're not going to be in line. Again, to thread your needle, give your thread, your sinew, whatever you're using, a little diagonal cut at the end. Thread it through the eye, go back on itself and pierce whatever it is you're using back on the needle, and slide it all the way down and tighten it. And that's not going anywhere. Do the same thing on both sides, and then you're ready to start your stitch. When we're doing a saddle stitch, I don't have a stitching pony, but like I told you in the video before, go through that first hole. You may need to get some pliers, pull it through. Then you're going to go into the second hole, do the same thing, pull it through. and pull both of them the same length. Now on my first stitch, I'm going to do a double stitch, because on my last stitch I'm going to back stitch. So actually the first two I'm going to double so that it looks the same. So this thread, and I go into great detail on how to do the saddle stitch on the other video, hold that thread over with your finger, holding it down, pulls this thread out of the way, and it puts tension on this side. The most important thing you can do when hand sewing is have as much constant pressure as you can. Try to get the same amount of pressure every time, because if you don't, your stitches won't look the same. Give it a little tug. Again, I'm going to go back over here to double it up just for aesthetics so it looks the same on both sides. Pull it through. And this one, you got a lot of thread. I did 6 times the length of the project so that I could make sure that I had enough. And I'm at a weird angle trying to make sure y'all can see stuff. I can't see what I'm doing. Pull it through, go to the next hole, pull it through, and again you're going to take the one that you just pulled through, you're going to kick that out of the way, you're going to hold that down with your finger, just like that, and then with the other needle, you're going to go back through the hole, if it doesn't want to go, don't force it, because it might be misaligned. You got a hole there, it's going to go in, and stitch it. Again, I'm going to go back again just for aesthetics, so that it looks the same on both ends, and thread it through. And from here, you just do the same thing over and over again. Hold that down, holding the thread out of the way, go back through the same hole with the needle, pull it all the way through, pull it tight, go to the next hole, pull it snug, hold it down with your other finger, and go through that same hole, and that creates your saddle stitch. Very, very durable stitch that's not going to go anywhere. Okay, I've come to the very end, and this is where I'm going to back stitch. I gave myself 6 times the length. I probably could have left myself a little bit more room because it looks like I'm just going to have enough. So on the back stitch, you just go back at least 2 stitches. And I always finish off the stitching on the back side so that when I burn it, my burned thread is not on the front side of the project. Snip. And then burn those edges. Try not to burn your leather. Just tap that down, and that will hold that stitch line in place. The only other thing I've got to do is place my snaps. I've already marked the holes off of my pattern. I just poked through to mark my holes. Now I got to punch them. But before I do that, I'm probably going to wax and put some need's foot oil on this, and then I'll punch them and we'll be done. I'm going to go in with my punch right on top of that hole and punch it. Do the same thing here. Okay, before, or so that I know where to punch the holes on the front of the mask, I've gone ahead and set the portion of the snaps in the flap. Let me walk around this axe handle. And what I'm going to do is I make sure everything's in there nice and snug, and bring this over and punch down, letting the posts mark the leather for me so I know where to punch my holes. Now this one, maybe this one, I might not be able to reach with, I can reach this first one, but I'm not going to be able to reach the second one. So that's where having a dedicated single punch comes in. Now I've got just a small piece of cutting board that I've got left over from a vice jaw project that I did. And that's what I'm going to use to back this up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and set these snaps. I've got these rivet and snap setting tools. Normally I put a very solid small benchtop anvil behind the back side of the snaps because you want them to be flat. If you don't, they'll round off. It's not going to fit because it's so tight. So hopefully this cutting board will work. And all you're going to do is lightly start tapping. You're going to walk it around so that it doesn't mushroom to one side or the other. And that is set. Now check it as you go, because you can hit that too hard and punch all the way through the middle. That one's good. That one still needs a little bit. All right, the face or the front of the snaps is a little bit different. The setting tool set that I have came with dished out small anvil so that it fits the snaps. You don't flatten them out. And then we're going to do the same thing like we did with the back side. Make sure everything's the correct orientation. And then we're going to set them. Nice and tight. I'll get the other one done and I'll show you the finished project. Let's see how it looks on the axe. Nice and snug. Those edges are nice and burnished and shiny. I think it looks great. There it is. Not too bad for using scrap leather. I think it turned out really nice. And the way it's designed, there's absolutely no way it's coming off unless you want it to. Perfect, simple, little easy project that anybody can do. If I left any questions on this video, I will try to put a link in the description to the video I did earlier that was extremely detailed. It's about an hour and 8 minutes long. And I went over all the basics. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. And until next time, get out there, save something for being forgotten, and live a big life. Whoa! Can I reach it?